If you are also using your networks to smuggle goods in that the state wants smuggled in, then in effect you will get a free passage through Russian border controls. Little engines that they needed to make drones. We saw a spate of thefts of these small engines across Europe. A lot of the money laundering. That's an area in which organised crime in some ways blazed the trail that the state is now using. It's clear that the Russians are increasingly using criminals as proxies for all kinds of activities, ranging from their sabotage missions that we've seen in Europe, burning down warehouses and shopping malls and the like, all the way through to sanctions busting and so forth. Now, when it comes to sanctions busting, essentially it's not gangsters who are doing it. It is third-party facilitators, business people in other countries who are finding ways of transferring substantial amounts of goods from their home country or their operating country to Russia. But on the other hand, gangsters still do have a role. First of all, in terms of a lot of the money laundering, because obviously if you're going to use third-party facilitators, you need to be able to pay them. So in terms of actually having the illicit financial flows which allow these processes to work, that's an area in which organised crime in some ways blazed the trail that the state is now using. Secondly, organised crime tends to be smaller scale in its sanctions busting operations, but much more responsive. For example, we saw immediately after the imposition of sanctions in 2022, when the Russians were getting quite desperate at that point to have, for example, the little engines that they needed to make drones, we saw a spate of thefts of these small engines from microlights and the like across Europe. And clearly these were being smuggled in because what's happened is, in effect, the state has established a social contract with organised crime. And one clause of that is, if you're smuggling things out of Russia, if you are also using your networks to smuggle goods in that the state wants smuggled in, then in effect you will get a free passage through Russian border controls. So that those heroin shipments or the guns or the counterfeit goods or whatever it is you might be smuggling to, say, Europe, you can be pretty sure that no Russian border guard or customs officer is going to check it if at the same time you're moving goods back in. So, we're talking about a very small share of the activities, but an unusually quick, responsive variety. And I think in this respect, it actually just speaks to this wider issue in that the Russian state, under the pressures of sanctions and the like, is using whatever informal channels it can to get round them. And part of that is absolutely organised crime.